Rain hammered Sistri out of Lago like punishment from the sky. In the middle of the flooded road, Mojisola pulled a heavy wooden cart with trembling hands, while her 3 children followed barefoot behind her, soaked, hungry, and shivering. A cruel trader shouted at her to move faster, even as little Simisola coughed and collapsed into the muddy water. People stopped to stare, but no one stepped forward. Then a black luxury SUV stopped beside them. A powerful CEO stepped out into the rain, removed his coat, and covered the child. But why would a man like him take a poor single mother home? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. And if stories of kindness, justice, and hope touch your heart, please subscribe and join this family. Before the sun fully rose over Lagos, Mojisola Adeyemi was already awake, not because she had rested, but because a cold drop of water landed on her cheek. She opened her eyes slowly and stared at the rusted zinc roof above her. The crack had widened again. Rainwater slipped through it in a thin, stubborn line, falling steadily beside the mattress where her children slept. Without making a sound, she sat up and placed an old plastic bowl under the leak. The room was barely large enough for 4 people. One worn-out mattress, a broken stool, a small charcoal stove pushed against the wall. The air smelled of dampness and fatigue. Everything in that room carried the weight of survival. Mojisola turned her gaze to her children. Kunla, her firstborn, lay closest to the door. Even in sleep, his arms stretched protectively over his younger sister Yuwand. At 9 years old, his face already held the quiet seriousness of someone who had learned too early that life was not gentle. Yuwand 6 slept curled beside him, her thin fingers gripping his shirt as if afraid of losing him. At the edge of the mattress, little Simisola lay wrapped in a faded cloth, her small body rising and falling softly. For a moment, Mojisola simply watched them. There was love in her eyes. But there was also guilt, a deep, silent guilt that never left her. She stood carefully, her joints stiff from exhaustion, and reached under the mattress for a small tin container. Inside were a few coins and one folded note, her entire savings. She counted them again, even though she already knew the truth. It was not enough. Not for rent, not for food, not for school. She closed the tin slowly and pressed it back into its hiding place. Outside the compound was beginning to stir. Buckets scraped against concrete. Women called out to each other. Somewhere, a baby cried. Life moved forward whether people were ready or not. "Mummy?" The soft voice pulled her back. Kunle was awake. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, then immediately looked toward the roof, then toward the bowl collecting water. His face tightened slightly. "It's still leaking," he said quietly. Mojisola forced a gentle smile. "It's nothing. Just small rain." He looked at her longer than a child should. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I did," she replied. He didn't argue. He had learned not to. Yuande stirred next, blinking slowly. "Are we going to school today?" she asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. Mojisola's chest tightened. For 3 days, they had stayed home. The school had warned her, no fees, no entry. It was not cruelty. It was business. But to a child who loved learning, It felt like rejection. Soon, Mojisola said softly, very soon. Yuanda nodded, but her eyes dimmed. Simisola woke last, coughing lightly. Mojisola lifted her into her arms, feeling the warmth of the child's small body. Not fever, but not strong either. I'm hungry, Simisola whispered. Those words never became easier to hear. Mojisola moved to the corner and brought out a small bowl of gari. It was barely enough, but she poured water into it, added a little sugar, and stirred carefully. She divided it into 3 small portions. The children ate slowly, quietly. Kunle noticed. You're not eating, he said. I already ate, Mojisola replied. It was a lie, a familiar one. He looked at her, then at his bowl, but said nothing. Instead, he ate more slowly, as if trying to make it last longer. After they finished, Mojisola washed their faces and adjusted their clothes, faded, worn, but clean. She tied Simisola to her back with a wrapper and prepared to step out. She had heard there was work at the market, heavy lifting, wet conditions, poor pay, but it was still something. Just as she reached the door, a loud knock stopped her. Not a gentle knock, a demanding one. Mojisola, open this door! Her body stiffened. Kunle moved closer to his sisters. Mojisola inhaled slowly and opened the door. Madame Abike stood outside. Her wrapper was bright. Her jewelry gleamed. Her expression held no patience. Good morning, Ma, Mojisola said quietly. Where is my money? Madame Abike snapped. Mojisola lowered her eyes. Ma, please, I am going to work now. I will bring something back today. Today? Madame Abike interrupted sharply. You have been saying today for weeks. Do you think if this is a free house? No, Ma. Then pay your rent. Mojisola clasped her hands. Please, just a little more time. Time. Madame Abike laughed harshly. Do you think I collect time or from my own landlord? Or from NEPA? Or from water board? The words struck hard. Behind Mojisola, Yuanda held Kunle's hand tightly. I am trying, Ma, Mojisola said, her voice trembling slightly. I am not refusing. You are failing, Madame Abike cut in. That is what you are doing. Lance fell. Then Madame Abike leaned close, her tone turning colder. You have 48 hours. Mojisola looked up. If I don't see my money in 2 days, Madame Abike continued, you and your children will leave this room. I will personally remove your things. Yuanda let out a soft cry. Madame Abike glanced at the children with irritation. Crying won't help you. Tell your mother to go and find your father. The words hung in the air like a slap. Mojisola's fingers tightened. Please don't speak to them like that, she said quietly. Madame Abike raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you have pride. Mojisola shook her head. No, Ma. Just, they are children. For a brief moment, something flickered in Madame Abike's eyes, then disappeared. 48 hours, she repeated, stepping back. Don't test me. She turned and walked away. Mojisola closed the door. Slowly. Inside the room, everything felt smaller, heavier. Kunli looked at her. Are we going to be outside Mojisola? Knelt down in front of them. Her heart was racing, but her voice stayed calm. No, she said. I will not let that happen. How? He asked. She paused, because she did not know. But she could not let them see that. I will find a way, she said softly. I always do. Kunli nodded slowly. Yuand wiped her tears. Simisola rested quietly against her back. Mojisola stood up. She adjusted the wrapper, tightened her grip, and opened the door again. Outside, the sky was already darkening. More rain was coming, and somewhere in that rain, her next chance was waiting. By the time Mojisola reached Oingbo Market, the rain had already begun again. Not a gentle drizzle. This was heavy, relentless rain that turned the ground into thick brown mud and soaked through clothes within minutes. The sky hung low and gray, as if it had no intention of clearing. Around her, traders rushed to cover their goods with nylon sheets, shouting over one another as water splashed beneath their feet. Mojisola tightened the wrapper around her waist and shifted Simisola slightly on her back. The child was quieter than usual, her small body pressed against her mother for warmth. Kunla and Yuande walked close behind barefoot, stepping carefully to avoid slipping. Mummy, it's cold, Yuande whispered, hugging herself. I know, my daughter, Mojisola replied softly. Stay close to me. Kunla didn't complain. He simply watched everything, the movement of people, the carts, the shouting, the chaos. His eyes moved like someone trying to understand the rules of a world that did not favor him. Mojisola scanned the busy market until she spotted a group of traders unloading bags of onions and peppers from a truck. Men were already carrying heavy loads on their backs, but she stepped forward anyway. Please, I can help, she said. One of the traders, a thick-set man with a cap pulled low over his eyes, glanced at her and frowned. You, he said, almost amused. Can you carry this? I will try, Mojisola answered. He laughed shortly. Try. This is not a place for trying. It is a place for strength. I am strong, she said quietly. He studied her for a second, the worn clothes, the tired eyes, the child tied to her back, the two children behind her. You people, he muttered, always bringing children everywhere. Mojisola lowered her gaze. There is no one to leave them with. The man shook his head, but the rain was slowing down the work, and he needed hands. Fine, he said, but if you slow us down, you leave. No argument. Thank you, Mojisola said. He pointed to a stack of heavy sacks. Start there. Mojisola stepped forward, bent down, and tried to lift one. The weight shocked her. Her muscles strained immediately, her back protesting, but she forced herself to stand. The sack was heavier than anything she had carried before, but she took a step forward, then another. The mud sucked at her feet. The rain stung her face. Still, she walked. Kunli watched her, his fists clenched. Mummy, let me help, he said. No, she replied firmly. Stay with your sister." But Kunla, her tone ended the argument. He swallowed his frustration and turned to Yuand, pulling her closer under a small overhang nearby. Mojisola carried the sack to the storage area and dropped it carefully. Her arms trembled, but she didn't stop. She returned for another and another. Time passed in slow, exhausting waves. Her clothes clung to her skin. Her feet slipped more than once. At one point, she nearly fell, but she caught herself just in time, tightening her grip on the sack as if her survival depended on it. Because it did. Each load meant money. Each step meant food. Each breath meant she had not given up. "Faster," the trader shouted. "The rain is not waiting for you." Mojisola nodded, though her body was reaching its limit. Behind her, Simisola began to cough again. A weak, dry sound. Mojisola felt it through her back like a warning. "Mummy," the little voice murmured faintly. "Just a little more, my baby." Mojisola whispered, "Just a little more." Kunli watched from a distance, his chest tight. Yuanda leaned against him, shivering. "Kunli," she said softly, "I'm scared." He wrapped his arm around her. "I'm here." But even he couldn't hide the fear in his own voice. The rain grew heavier. Water pooled around their feet. The market became louder, more chaotic, more unforgiving. People pushed past one another without apology. Survival did not allow for kindness. After another trip, Mojisola returned to the truck, breathing hard. "Please," she said to the trader, "my children are cold. Can they stand closer to the shelter?" The man barely looked at her. "If they are in the way, they leave. They won't be in the way." "Then don't ask me again," he snapped. Mojisola nodded quickly. "Yes." She turned back to her work, but her eyes kept drifting to her children. Kunla had removed his shirt and tried to cover Yuandi with it. Simisola's coughing had worsened. The little girl's head hung slightly, her energy fading. Something inside Mojisola twisted painfully. She quickened her pace. Another sack, another step, another breath. Her body screamed for rest, but she ignored it. Then it happened. As she bent to lift another sack, her hands slipped on the wet fabric. The weight shifted unexpectedly. Her foot lost balance in the mud. She fell hard. Sack crashed beside her, splashing muddy water across her face and clothes. For a moment, everything went still. Then the laughter came. Not loud, but enough. Mojisola pushed herself up quickly, her heart pounding with humiliation more than pain. "Stand up," the trader shouted. "We are not paying you to sleep in the mud." "I'm sorry," she said, breathless. "Sorry doesn't move goods." She reached for the sack again. Her hands trembled, but she lifted it. Because stopping was not an option. Because 48 hours were already counting down. Because her children were watching. Because hunger was waiting at home. As she turned to carry the sack, a weak sound behind her made her freeze. "Mummy!" It was Simisola, but the voice was barely there. Mojisola dropped the sack instantly and turned. The little girl had slipped from her position under the shelter. Her small body lay on the wet ground, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. Mojisola ran to her, lifting her into her arms. The child's body felt too light, too still. "Mummy," Yuand cried. Kunle knelt beside them, his face pale. "She's not talking." Mojisola's heart slammed against her chest. "Simasla, look at me," she said, urgently tapping the child's cheek. "Look at me, my baby." No response. The rain poured harder. The noise of the market faded into the background. All that mattered was the child in her arms. "Please," Mojisola whispered at her voice breaking. "Please don't do this." She looked around desperately. No one moved. Some people glanced over, then looked away. The trader's voice came again, distant, impatient. "If you're done with drama, come back to work." Mojisola didn't even hear him properly. Her world had narrowed to one thing: her daughter. She pressed Mojisola closer, her body shaking now, not from cold, but from fear. And for the first time that day, she stopped working. For a few seconds, Mojisola could not hear anything. The market noise, the shouting, the dragging of sacks, the pounding rain faded into a dull, distant echo. All she could feel was the fragile weight of Mojisola in her arms. And too light, too still. "Mojisola, please, open your eyes," she whispered, her voice trembling in a way she could no longer control. The child did not respond. Kunle leaned closer, panic rising in his chest. "Mummy, do something." Yawanda had begun to cry openly, now her small hands shaking. "She's not moving." "Mummy," Mojisola pressed her ear to the child's chest. There was a heartbeat. Weak, but there. Relief and terror collided inside her. "She's breathing," Mojisola said quickly, almost to convince herself. "She's breathing." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't enough. Mojiisola's body was cold from the rain. Her lips had lost their color. The kowaking had stopped, not because she was better, but because she had no strength left. Mojisola looked around desperately. People were still moving, still working, still negotiating prices, dragging goods, arguing over money. Life had not paused for her emergency. It never did. "Please," she shouted, her voice breaking through the rain. "Someone help me." "My child? She's not well." A few heads turned. A woman under a stall shook her head sympathetically, but did not move. A man glanced over, then continued loading his cart. Another trader muttered, "Take her to a clinic," as if the answer were simple, as if clinics did not require money. Mojisola tightened her hold on Mojisola. "I don't have money," she said aloud, though no one had asked. Her voice sounded small in the chaos. Kunle stood up suddenly, anger flashing across his face. "Why is nobody helping?" he shouted. "She's a child." A man nearby frowned. "Lower your voice, boy." Kunle stepped forward. "She can die!" Kunle Mojisola snapped, pulling him back. Enough. But his words had already hung in the air. Uncomfortable. True. Ignored. Behind them, the trader, Alhaji Ganiyu, approached, irritation clear on his face. "What is all this noise?" he demanded. Mojisola turned to him, hope rising for a brief, foolish second. "Please," she said quickly, "my daughter is sick. I need to take her somewhere. Just give me a small advance from the work. I will return." "No," he said flatly. The word struck like a slap. "Please." Mojisola insisted, her voice shaking now. "I have already worked. You have not finished." He cut in. "No finish, no pay. She is my child. And this is my business," he replied coldly. "Do you think I am running charity here?" Mojisola stared at him. Her mind struggled to process how easily he could say it. "She can die," she whispered. Alhaji Ganiyu shrugged slightly. "Then take her and go. But don't expect money you didn't earn." Silence followed. Heavy. Ugly. Kunle's fists clenched so tightly. His knuckles turned pale. Yuan sobbed quietly. Mojisola's heart felt like it was being crushed from all sides. She had two choices: stay and finish the work, while her child lay weak in her arms, or leave with nothing. No money, no food, no rent, no solution. Only more problems waiting at home. Her body trembled under the weight of that decision. For a moment she hesitated, not because she did not love her child, but because poverty had forced her to measure survival in impossible ways. Then Simasola's head rolled slightly against her shoulder. That was enough. Mojisola stood up abruptly. "I'm going," she said. "Alhaji." Ganiyu scoffed. "Then go, and don't come back asking for work." She didn't reply. She adjusted Simasola, carefully lifting her fully into her arms now, instead of tying her to her back. The child's head rested against her chest, too quiet, too weak. "Kunla." "Hold your sister," she said. He took Yuanda's hand immediately. "We're going to find help." Mojisola added more to steady herself than them. The rain hit harder as they stepped away from the market. The ground was slippery, the path unclear, the world blurred by water and fear. "Mummy!" "Where are we going?" Yuanda asked through tears. "To a clinic," Mojisola said. "But we don't have money," Kunle said quietly. Mojisola swallowed. "I will find a way." She began to walk faster. Every step felt heavier. Her arms ached from carrying Simasola. Her legs trembled from exhaustion. But she did not stop, not even when the rain soaked through her wrapper, not even when mud splashed up her legs, not even when people brushed past her without looking. She moved like someone chasing time, because she was. "Mummy," Kunle said suddenly. She looked down. His eyes were fixed on her face. What if she doesn't wake up?" The question pierced her. Mojisola shook her head immediately. "Don't say that." "But she will be fine," Mojisola said firmly, forcing strength into her voice. "Do you hear me? She will be fine." Kunle nodded, but fear still clung to him. Ahead through the rain, a small roadside clinic came into view. The sign was faded, the building simple, but it was something. Hope flickered. Mojisola quickened her pace. When they reached the entrance, She pushed the door open and stepped inside, dripping water onto the tiled floor. A nurse behind the desk looked up, startled. "Please," Mojisola said, her voice breaking completely now. "My child, she needs help." The nurse stood quickly and came forward. "What happened?" "She collapsed. She hasn't been eating well. She's been coughing." "Put her here," the nurse said, guiding her to a bench. Mojisola laid Simisola down gently. The nurse checked her pulse, her breathing, her temperature. Mojisola watched every movement, her heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might burst. After a moment, the nurse looked up. "She needs treatment," she said. Relief rushed through Mojisola too quickly. How much she asked? The nurse hesitated slightly. "Consultation and basic treatment, 5,000 naira." The number hit like a wall. Mojisola froze. I don't have it," she said quietly. The nurse's expression softened, but her voice remained professional. "We can't proceed without payment." "Please," Mojisola whispered. "I will pay later. I swear. I will come back." "I'm sorry," the nurse said gently. "It's the policy." Policy. Another word that meant nothing to the poor until it blocked their survival. Kunla stepped forward suddenly. "She's dying." The nurse looked at him, then at Mojisola. Mojisola's knees felt weak. She looked down at Simisola. The child had not opened her eyes. Not once. "Mummy." Yuwanda cried softly, clutching her wrapper. Mojisola felt something inside her break. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. She reached for Simisola again, lifting her slowly into her arms. "Let's go," she said. The nurse watched her, conflicted, but did not stop her, because rules were rules. And poverty had never been an emergency anyone wanted to take responsibility for. Mojisola turned and walked back into the rain. Kunle and Yuwanda followed silently. This time, the rain felt colder, heavier, like it was no longer just water, but something pressing down on them, crushing. And as she stepped back onto the flooded street, holding her silent child close to her chest, Mojisola realized something terrifying. She was running out of options. The rain had not stopped. If anything, it had grown heavier, thicker, louder, as if the sky itself refused to show mercy. Mojisola stepped back onto the flooded street, clutching Simisola tightly against her chest. The child's head rested limply on her shoulder, her small body frighteningly still. Water dripped from Mojisola's hair, her clothes, her eyelashes, but she no longer noticed. She had entered a different kind of storm. "Mummy, what do we do now?" Yuan's voice trembled behind her. Mojisola did not answer immediately, because she did not know. For the first time in a long time, she truly did not know what to do next. Kunle stepped closer, his face pale but determined. "We can go to another clinic," he said. "Maybe they will help." Mojisola swallowed hard. "Maybe," she replied quietly. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. Another clinic would ask the same question. Payment first, life later. Still, she began to walk. Step after step, through the rain, through the noise, through the indifference of a city, that had no time to notice one struggling woman and her children. Cars passed. People rushed by with umbrellas. A few glanced at her, at the soaked woman holding an unconscious child, but their eyes quickly moved on. Because stopping meant responsibility, and responsibility was something most people avoided. Mojisola tightened her grip on Simisola. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please, stay with me." Her voice broke on the last word. Ahead, traffic slowed suddenly. A line of vehicles had formed, blocked by flooding at a junction. Among them, a sleek black SUV stood out clean polished, untouched by the chaos around it. Inside Adewale, Balogun leaned back in the leather seat, his jaw tight. The meeting had gone badly. Another disagreement with the board. Another reminder that power came with endless expectations and silent battles. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. For a moment, he closed his eyes. He was used to pressure, used to responsibility, used to solving problems others could not. But something about that day felt off. The rain tapped steadily against the window. Then his driver, Baba Sei, spoke. "Sir." Adewale opened his eyes. "What is it?" "There is something ahead." Adewale glanced forward. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the usual Lagos scene traffic rain movement. Then his gaze caught something. A woman, standing in the rain, holding a child. Something about the way she stood still, unmoving, almost frozen, pulled his attention. People were walking around her, avoiding her, as if she were invisible. But she wasn't. Not to him. "Wait," Adewale said. Baba Sei glanced at him. "Sir, stop the car." The driver hesitated for a second. This was not a place where powerful men stopped without reason, but he obeyed. The SUV came to a halt. Adewale leaned forward slightly, studying the scene more carefully now. The woman's clothes were soaked and clung to her thin frame. Her face looked exhausted, beyond words. Two children stood beside her, one holding the other, both shivering. And in her arms, the child did not move. Something shifted inside Adewale. He had seen poverty before. He had grown up around it, even if his life had taken him far from it now. But this was not just poverty. This was desperation at its edge. "Sir, we should move," Baba Sei said quietly. "This area is not open the door," Adewale said. The driver blinked. "Sir, open the door." There was no hesitation in his voice now. Baba Sei quickly stepped out and opened the back door, holding an umbrella over him. But Adewale didn't take it. He stepped into the rain. Cold water hit him instantly, soaking his suit within seconds. But he barely noticed. His focus was fixed entirely on the woman ahead. Mojisola didn't see him at first. Her eyes were locked on Simisola's face. "Please," she whispered again. "Please wake up. Mummy?" Kunle said suddenly, his voice tense. She looked up and froze. A tall man stood before her, well-dressed, clean, out of place in every possible way. For a brief second, confusion crossed her face. Then instinct followed. She stepped back slightly, tightening her hold on her child. "I'm not begging," she said quickly, her voice defensive, despite her condition. "I'm not asking for anything." Adewale stopped a few steps away. "I didn't say you were," he replied calmly. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was something else in it. Concern. He looked at the child in her arms. What happened to her? Mojisola hesitated. Trust did not come easily. Not after everything. "She's sick," she said finally. "I took her to a clinic. They said I need money." Adewale nodded slowly. "How long has she been like this?" "She collapsed. Not long ago." He studied the child again. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. This was urgent. Without another word, Adewale removed his suit jacket. The movement caught Mojisola off guard. He stepped closer, carefully, slowly, giving her time to react. Then he placed the jacket gently over Simisola, shielding her from the rain. Mojisola blinked. The gesture was simple, but it felt impossible. "Why?" she asked quietly. Adewale met her eyes. Because he didn't have an easy answer. Because sometimes humanity didn't need explanation. "Because she's a child," he said. The words landed softly, but deeply. Kunle watched him closely. Yuando clung to her brother. The rain continued to fall around them, but something had changed. Something subtle. Something fragile. Adewale turned slightly toward his driver. "Open the car!" Baba Sei hurried to obey. Mojisola's eyes widened. "No," she said quickly. "I can't." "You can," Adewale interrupted gently. "I don't know you," she added, her voice shaking. "And I don't know you," he replied. "But I know this child needs help. Now." Silence. Heavy. Real. Mojisola looked down at Simisola. Then at Kunle. Then at Yuand. Her mind raced. Every warning she had ever learned rose inside her. Don't trust strangers. Nothing is free. There is always a price. But there was another truth standing right in front of her. Her child might not survive another delay. Kunle stepped forward slightly. "Mummy," he said softly. She looked at him. His eyes were full of fear, but also hope. That was what broke her resistance. Mojisola inhaled deeply, then nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Adewale didn't smile. He simply stepped aside, allowing her to move. Baba Sei opened the door wider. For the first time that day, Mojisola stepped into something dry, something warm, something unfamiliar. Safety. Kunle and Yewande followed quickly, their eyes wide with uncertainty. Adewale closed the door behind them and turned to the driver. "Nearest hospital," he said. "Private one." Baba Sei nodded immediately. As the SUV pulled away from the flooded street, the rain continued to fall. But inside the car, everything was different. And for the first time since the morning began, Mojisola was no longer alone. The inside of the SUV felt like another world. Warm, quiet, still. For a moment, Mojisola did not move. She sat at the edge of the leather seat, her soaked wrapper clinging to her skin, her arms wrapped tightly around Simisola, as if letting go, even slightly, might cause the child to disappear. Kunle and Yuwande sat close beside her, their eyes wide, taking in everything: the clean seats, the soft lighting, the absence of shouting and chaos. It was the first time in a long while that they were not surrounded by struggle. But none of it brought comfort yet, because Simisola had still not opened her eyes. "Sir, we're heading to St. Mary's." Baba Sayi called from the front. Adewale gave a brief nod. "Call ahead. Tell them we're coming with a child emergency." "Yes, sir." Mojisola looked up sharply. You called them?" she asked, her voice unreal. Adewale glanced at her. "They'll be ready when we arrive." Her grip tightened slightly around Simisola. "Thank you," she said quietly. The words felt too small for what she was feeling. Adewale didn't respond immediately. His attention remained on the child, his expression focused, almost clinical now. He had seen emergencies before. He understood the urgency of time. "How long has she been coughing?" he asked. 3 days, Mojisola replied. "Maybe more. It got worse today." "Fever?" "A little. Not too much. And food?" Mojisola hesitated. We eat when we can." Adewale's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. There were questions he could ask. There were judgments he could form. But none of them would help the child in that moment. Simisola shifted faintly, in Mojisola's arms, letting out a weak breath. "Mummy," she murmured. Mojisola leaned down instantly. "Yes, my baby. I'm here." The child's eyes fluttered slightly, but did not fully open. Kunle leaned closer. "She's talking." Yuwande grabbed his hand tightly. "She's waking up, right?" Mojisola forced a hopeful smile. "Yes." "She's strong," but fear still sat heavily in her chest. The car moved quickly through the streets, bypassing traffic with practiced ease. Outside, Lagos remained loud and restless, but inside the vehicle, everything felt suspended. Time stretched. Every second mattered. When they finally arrived at the hospital, the SUV barely came to a full stop before the doors opened. 2 nurses rushed forward with a stretcher. "Child Emergency 1 asked quickly. "Yes," Adewale replied. Mojisola hesitated for half a second before gently placing Simisola onto the stretcher. Her hands lingered for a moment, reluctant to let go. "It's okay," the nurse said, already moving. "We've got her." Mojisola followed immediately, her heart pounding. Kunle and Yuwande stayed close behind. The hospital corridors were bright, clean, and efficient, nothing like the small roadside clinic they had left behind. Everything moved with purpose. No hesitation. No waiting for payment before action. Doctors surrounded Simisola within seconds. "What's the condition?" one asked. "Collapsed, weak pulse. Possible dehydration, respiratory issue." A nurse replied quickly. "Get her on oxygen. Start fluids." Mojisola stood at the edge, frozen. She watched as strangers took control, as machines were brought in, as instructions were given rapidly. She had never seen this level of urgency directed toward her child before. It felt unreal. "Mummy," Yuwande whispered, holding her arm tightly. Mojisola didn't look away from the scene. "She'll be okay," she said. This time she wasn't just hoping, she was believing. A few minutes later, a doctor approached her. "Are you the mother?" "Yes." "I'm Dr. Okoye," he said calmly. "Your daughter is severely dehydrated and showing signs of early respiratory infection. We've started treatment." Mojisola nodded quickly. "She will be okay." "We are doing everything necessary," he replied. "You brought her in just in time." Those words hit her harder than anything else. Just in time. If she had waited, if she had stayed at the market, if she had hesitated even a little longer. Mojisola felt her knees weaken. Kunle quickly supported her. "Mummy," she steadied herself. "I'm okay," she said, though her voice trembled. Dr. Okoye gave a small reassuring nod. "She's in good hands." Then he turned and walked back toward the treatment room. Silence fell over them. For the first time that day, there was nothing to do. No running, no begging, no fighting, just waiting. Mojisola slowly turned. Adewale stood a short distance away, speaking quietly with a hospital staff member. His presence felt steady, controlled, like someone used to being in charge, but choosing not to dominate the space. When he finished, he walked over. "She's receiving full treatment," he said. Mojisola nodded. "Thank you." The words came again. Still not enough. "You don't have to thank me," Adewale replied. "I do," she said softly. "They refused to treat her before, because I didn't have money." Adewale's expression shifted slightly. "That won't be a problem here," he said. Mojisola lowered her eyes. "I will repay you," she added quickly, "even if it takes time." Adewale studied her for a moment. "I didn't bring you here for repayment." "I know," she said, "but I still will." Something in her tone made it clear this was not pride. This was dignity. Adewale gave a small nod. "We'll talk about that later." Kunle stepped forward slightly. "Sir," he said. Adewale looked down at him. "Thank you," the boy said. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried more emotion than his words. Adewale nodded once. "You're welcome." Yewande moved closer to Mojisola, still holding her arm. "Mummy, can we stay here?" she asked softly. Mojisola hesitated. The question wasn't just about the hospital. It was about everything. Before she could answer, a nurse approached. "You can sit over there," she said, pointing to a waiting area. "We'll update you soon." Mojisola nodded and guided her children to the chairs. They sat together, quiet, exhausted, but no longer in immediate danger. A few minutes passed, then 10, then more. Time felt different now, slower, heavier, filled with anticipation. Finally, Dr. Okoye returned. "The child is stable," he said. Relief crashed over Mojisola so suddenly. She almost gasped. "Stable," she repeated. "Yes. She's responding to treatment. We'll keep her under observation, but she's out of immediate danger." Mojisola covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, real tears this time. Not silent suffering, not hidden pain, but release. Kunle exhaled deeply. Yewande smiled through her tears. She's okay, she whispered. Mojisola nodded, unable to speak. Across the room, Adewale watched quietly. He didn't step forward. He didn't interrupt the moment. He simply stood there, observing. Because some moments belonged entirely to the people living them. After a while, Mojisola stood and walked toward him. Her steps were slower now, heavier with emotion. "Sir," she began. Adewale looked at her. "My name is Mojisola," she said, "and I will never forget what you did today." Adewale gave a slight nod. "Adewale," he replied. She repeated the name sinfully, as if committing it to memory. Then she looked back toward the room where her daughter lay. For the first time in days. Her heart was not filled with fear, but with something unfamiliar, hope. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet thought began to form. Maybe this moment, this unexpected encounter, was the beginning of something she did not yet understand. The hospital room was quiet, in a way Mojisola had almost forgotten existed. Not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, but the kind that comes from safety. The kind where nothing is chasing you, nothing is threatening to collapse, nothing is demanding something you cannot give. Mojisola lay on the bed, a small oxygen tube resting gently beneath her nose. Her chest rose and fell steadily now, no longer shallow, no longer frighteningly weak. A drip line fed fluid slowly into her arm, and the steady rhythm of the monitor beside her was the most comforting sound Mojisola had ever heard. Alive. That was all that mattered. Mojisola sat close, her fingers resting lightly on Mojisola hand, as if she needed to feel that life through her own skin. She had not moved much since the doctor had told her the child was stable. Kunla and Yuwand sat nearby, quieter than usual, their bodies finally beginning to relax after the storm of fear they had been holding inside. Mummy Yuwand whispered, her voice softer now. "She looks better." Mojisola nodded slowly. "Yes, she does." Kunla leaned forward, studying his little sister carefully. "She's breathing normally," he said, as if confirming it for himself. Mojisola looked at him. There was something in his voice that felt older than 9 years. Too aware, too responsible. "You did well today," she told him gently. Kunle frowned slightly. "I didn't do anything." "You stayed strong," she said. "You helped your sister. You didn't run." He looked down, unsure how to respond. "I was scared," he admitted quietly. "I was too," Mojisola said. That surprised him. He looked up. "You were," she smiled faintly. "Being brave doesn't mean you are not afraid. It means you don't let the fear stop you." Kunle absorbed that silently. Across the room, Yuwand shifted in her seat, her small body finally giving in to exhaustion. She leaned against the chair, her eyes closing slowly, until sleep claimed her. Kunle followed, not long after, his head dropping forward, before Mojisola gently guided him to rest properly. For the first time in days, all three of her children were safe, warm, protected. Mojisola exhaled deeply, her shoulders dropping, as the tension inside her began to loosen just slightly. A soft knock came at the door. She turned. A nurse stepped in quietly. "You can come to the waiting area," she said gently. "The child will rest now." Mojisola hesitated, her eyes returning to Simisola. "She will be okay," the nurse reassured. Mojisola nodded and carefully stood. She adjusted Yuwand and Kunle, waking them gently enough to guide them out, without causing confusion. They stepped into the corridor, where the lights felt brighter, the air cooler, and there Adewale was still there. He stood near the far end of the waiting area, speaking quietly on his phone. His posture was calm, controlled, but his presence filled the space in a way that was difficult to ignore. When he saw them, he ended the call. "She's stable," he said. Mojisola nodded. "Yes, thank you." The words felt repetitive now, but they were all she had. Adewale glanced at the children. "They need food," he said simply. Mojisola hesitated. We will manage." Adewale didn't argue. Instead, he turned to a staff member nearby and gave a quiet instruction. Within minutes, a tray of food was brought, simple but warm. Rice, stew, bread, clean water. The smell alone made Yuwanda's eyes widen. Kunle swallowed. Mojisola stiffened slightly. It had been a long time since she had accepted something without calculating the cost. "You should eat," Adewale said. She started, then stopped. Her instinct was to refuse. Her instinct was to protect herself. But then she looked at her children. Yuwand was already staring at the food with quiet longing. Kunle tried to look composed, but hunger was written all over him. Mojisola exhaled slowly. "Say thank you," she said softly. "Thank you, sir," the children said together. They sat and began to eat. At first slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear if they moved too fast. Then faster, more urgently, not greedily, but with the quiet desperation of children who had learned that food was never guaranteed. Mojisola watched them. Her chest tightened, because even this simple act of eating without fear felt like something she had failed to give them. Adewale observed quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not comment. He simply watched, because sometimes dignity was allowing people to receive without feeling examined. After a while, Mojisola picked up a piece of bread. Her hands hesitated. Then she ate. The food tasted unfamiliar. Not because it was different, but because it had been too long since she had eaten. Without worry, without dividing portions, without pretending she was not hungry. For a moment her eyes closed. And in that moment she felt something dangerous. Relief. Dangerous because relief could make a person forget reality. And reality was still waiting outside that hospital. When they finished, the children leaned back slightly, their bodies calmer, their eyes heavier. "Mommy," Yuwande said softly, "can we stay here tonight?" The question hung between them. Mojisola didn't answer immediately. She looked at Adewale. He met her gaze. "You don't have to go anywhere tonight," he said. The words were simple, but their meaning was not. Mojisola's heart tightened. "Sir, I don't want to be a burden. Adewale shook his head slightly. You're not. She hesitated. I don't understand why you are helping us, she admitted. It wasn't an accusation. It was confusion. Adewale considered her question. Then he spoke quietly. When I was younger, he said, my mother once stood in the rain like that, holding me. Mojisola's breath caught slightly. She didn't have help, he continued. No one stopped. No one asked. We survived, but I never forgot that day. Silence followed. Heavy, honest. So today, he added, I stopped. Mojisola looked at him differently now. Not as a stranger, not as a powerful man, but as someone who understood. In a way, words couldn't fully explain. I see, she said softly. Kunl, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Did someone help your mother later? Adewale looked at him, then shook his head. No. Kunla frowned slightly. Then, why are you helping us? Adewale's expression shifted. Because someone should have helped her, he said. The answer settled into the room like truth. Yuanda leaned against Mojisola. Mummy, he's good, she whispered. Mojisola placed a hand gently on her head. Yes, she said quietly. He is. A nurse approached again. The child is resting well, she said. You can stay nearby. Mojisola nodded. She turned back to Adewale. I don't know how to repay you, she said. You don't need to, he replied. I do, she insisted gently. Not with money, but with something. Adewale studied her. What do you want? He asked. Mojisola hesitated. Then she spoke. A chance. The word was soft, but it carried weight. I don't want charity, she continued. I want to work. I want to take care of my children, without begging. Adewale's gaze sharpened slightly. There it was. Not weakness, not dependency, but strength, buried under exhaustion. I understand, he said, and for the first time since they met, something shifted between them. Not just help, but respect. Mojisola exhaled slowly. Outside, the rain had begun to ease. Inside the hospital, her children rested safely. And standing before her was a man who had changed the direction of her day, without asking for anything in return. But deep down, Mojisola knew. This moment was not the end of her struggle. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. The night passed slowly, but for the first time in many nights, it passed without fear. Mojisola barely slept, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't trust peace yet. Every few minutes, she found herself standing again, walking quietly into Simisola's room, watching the small rise and fall of her daughter's chest. Each steady breath felt like a miracle she was afraid might stop if she looked away for too long. Kunla and Yuande slept in chairs in the waiting area, their bodies finally surrendering to exhaustion. They had eaten, they were warm, and for once there was no shouting, no hunger, no rain leaking through the roof. Mojisola watched them too. 3 children. 3 reasons she could not afford to break. By early morning, the hospital had grown quieter. The night staff moved with slower steps, and the soft hum of machines replaced the chaos of the previous day. A gentle knock came at the door. "Good morning," Dr. Okoye said as he stepped inside. Mojisola stood immediately. "Good morning, sir." He glanced at Simisola, checked her chart, and nodded slightly. "She's improving well," he said. "The fluids are helping. Her breathing is stabilizing." Relief flooded Mojisola again. "Thank you," she said softly. Dr. Okoye looked at her for a moment, then asked, "Has she been exposed to cold and rain often?" Mojisola hesitated. "Yes," she admitted. We don't always have a dry place." The doctor didn't press further. He had seen enough cases like this to understand the story without hearing every detail. "She'll need proper rest," he said. "Warmth, regular meals, and medication for the next few days." Mojisola nodded quickly. Then reality returned. Medication, food, rest. All things that required stability she did not yet have. "I will do everything," she said. Dr. Okoye gave a small nod and left. Mojisola turned back to Simisola, brushing her fingers gently across the child's forehead. "You hear that?" she whispered. "You are getting better." Simisola stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. "Mummy?" Mojisola's breath caught. "I'm here," she said immediately. The child's eyes opened weakly. "Water?" Mojisola reached quickly, helping her sip carefully. Kunla and Yuwande awakened by the small voice rushed to the doorway. "She's awake!" Yuwande said, her face lighting up. Kunlo stepped closer, his expression softer than it had been in days. "You scared us," he said quietly. Simisola gave a faint smile. "I'm okay," she whispered. Mojisola closed her eyes briefly, letting the moment settle inside her. Alive, still here. That was enough. Later that morning, after ensuring Simisola was resting comfortably again, Mojisola stepped out into the hallway. Adewale was there. He stood near a window, looking out at the city below. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and shining under the early light. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "She's awake," Mojisola said. A small pause. Then Adewale nodded. Good. The simplicity of his response carried quiet satisfaction. Mojisola stepped closer. "I spoke to the doctor," she said. "She will need medication and proper care." Adewale nodded again. "That will be arranged." Mojisola hesitated. "Sir, I need to say something clearly." He looked at her. "I am grateful," she continued. "More than I can explain. But I don't want it to depend on you." Adewale's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. "I meant what I said yesterday," she added. "I want to work. I want to stand on my own." Silence followed. Adewale studied her carefully. Most people in her position would ask for more. Money, comfort, security. But she was asking for something else, dignity. "Do you have any experience?" he asked. Mojisola nodded. "Cleaning, carrying goods, cooking small things. I learn quickly." Adewale considered this. There may be something, he said slowly. But it won't be easy work. I am not afraid of hard work, she replied. I can see that. Another pause. Then he spoke again. For now, you and your children will not return to that room. Mojisola stiffened slightly. Sir, it's not a discussion, he said calmly. You need a place where your child can recover. She looked down. I don't want to take advantage. You're not, he interrupted gently. You're accepting help at the moment you need it most. There's a difference. Mojisola fell silent, because deep down, she knew he was right. But accepting help still felt unfamiliar, uncomfortable. Where would we go? She asked quietly. Mahom Adewale said. The words hung in the air, heavy, unexpected. Mojisola looked up quickly. Your home. Yes. She shook her head slightly, instinctively. No, I can't. You can, he said. I don't even know you, she added, her voice tightening. Adewale didn't react defensively. You know enough, he replied. And you can leave any time you feel uncomfortable. Mojisola's mind raced. A man like him. A house like his. A world so far removed from hers. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel safe. But then she thought of Madame Abaika, of the 48 hours, of the leaking roof, of the hunger, of the fear in Kunla's eyes, of Yuande's quiet disappointment, of Simasola's fragile body. And suddenly, her options became clear. This wasn't about comfort. It was about survival. Kunle stepped into the hallway then, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Mummy, he said softly. She turned to him. He looked at Adewale, then back at her. Can we go? He asked. The question was simple, but it carried everything. Hope, fear, trust. Mojisola closed her eyes briefly, then opened them and nodded. Yes, she said. Adewale gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It's settled then. Later that afternoon, Simasola was discharged under careful instructions. She was still weak, but stable enough to leave with proper care. Mojisola gathered their few belongings, the same worn clothes, the same small bag that carried everything they owned. As they stepped out of the hospital, the air felt different, clearer, lighter, but uncertain. The SUV was waiting. Baba Seyi opened the door once again. Kunle and Yewande climbed in quieter this time, not from fear, but from the weight of everything changing so quickly. Mojisola paused for a moment before entering. She looked back at the hospital, at the place where her child had been saved, at the place where something in her life had shifted. Then she stepped inside. The door closed. And as the car pulled away, Mojisola felt it clearly. She was leaving behind more than just a building. She was leaving behind the life she had been trapped in. But she did not yet know what kind of life she was stepping into. The gates were taller than anything Mojisola had ever stood before. Black iron, polished, unmoving, guarding a world that did not belong to her. As the SUV slowed and the gates opened automatically, Mojisola felt her breath catch slightly. Kunle leaned forward, his eyes wide. Yuanda pressed her face closer to the window, silent with wonder. Simisola lay across Mojisola's lap, still weak, but awake now, her small fingers gripping the edge of her mother's wrapper as if afraid to let go. They drove in. The compound stretched wider than she expected. Clean pathways, trimmed lawns, and trees that looked like they were cared for, not just growing wild like in her world. The house itself stood ahead, large, elegant, quiet, in a way that felt almost unreal. This was not just a house. It was stability. It was control. It was everything her life had not been. The car came to a stop. Baba Saif stepped out first, opening the door. "We're here," he said gently. Mojisola hesitated. For a second, her body refused to move. Kunle stepped out first cautiously, his eyes scanning everything like someone entering unknown territory. Yuande followed, holding his hand tightly. Mojisola stepped out last, adjusting Simisola carefully. Adwal was already walking toward the entrance. "Come," he said simply. They followed. Inside, the air was cool, clean, and scented faintly something soft, unfamiliar. The floors shone. The walls were decorated, but not loudly. Everything felt controlled. A woman in a neat uniform approached. "Good afternoon, sir," she said. "Good afternoon," Bose Adewale replied. "Prepare a guest room." Bose's eyes moved briefly to Mojisola and the children. Just a second. But Mojisola felt it. Not open judgment, but assessment. "Which one?" Sir Bose asked. "The one near the east wing. Make sure it's ready immediately." "Yes, sir." Bose turned and walked away quickly. Mojisola stood still, unsure where to place herself in the space. Adewale noticed. "You can sit," he said, gesturing to a nearby sofa. She nodded and guided the children over. They sat carefully, as if afraid of damaging something. Kunle ran his fingers lightly across the armrest. "It's soft," he whispered. Yuant nodded, her eyes still moving around the room. Simisola leaned against Mojisola, her head resting gently. For a moment no one spoke. Then footsteps returned. "Bose." "The room is ready, sir." Adewale nodded. "Show them." Bose turned toward Mojisola. "This way." Mojisola stood adjusting her grip on Simisola and followed. They walked down a quiet hallway, past doors, past framed photos, past a life that felt distant from her own. When Bose opened the door, Mojisola stopped. The room was more than she expected. A large bed, clean sheets, soft pillows, a window that let in natural light, a small table, a private bathroom. It wasn't just a room. It was comfort. For a moment, Mojisola didn't step inside. "You can enter," Bose said. Mojisola nodded slowly. She walked in. Kunle followed. Then Yuand. They looked around silently. "This is for us?" Yuand asked softly. Yes, Bose replied. Kunle looked at his mother. Mummy? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mojisola placed Simisola gently on the bed. The child sank slightly into the mattress. Her eyes widened. It's soft, she whispered. Mojisola smiled faintly. Yes, it is. Bose stepped back slightly. If you need anything, ask, she said. Then she left. The door closed, and suddenly they were alone. Mojisola sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands rested on her lap. Her body was still tense, because this still didn't feel real. Kunle walked around the room slowly. There's a bathroom, he said. Yewande touched the curtains. They're clean. Simisola curled slightly into the blanket, her small body relaxing in a way Mojisola had not seen in a long time. Mojisola watched them. Her children. In a place like this, it felt like something that could disappear at any moment. A knock came at the door. Mojisola stood quickly. When she opened it, Adewale was there. I wanted to check on you, he said. We are fine, she replied. He nodded slightly, glancing past her at the children. They'll need rest, he said, and proper meals. Mojisola nodded. Thank you, she said again. Adewale looked at her. You don't have to keep saying that. I do, she replied quietly. A small pause. Then Adewale spoke again. Tomorrow we'll talk about work. Mojisola's attention sharpened. Yes, sir. But for today... You rest. She hesitated. I'm not used to resting. I can tell, he said. Something about his tone made her pause. Not judgment, just observation. Try, he added. Mojisola nodded slowly. I will. Adewale turned to leave. But before he did, he said one more thing. You're safe here. The words lingered. Then he walked away. Mojisola closed the door. She leaned against it for a moment. Safe. The word felt unfamiliar. She turned back to the room. To her children. Kunle had finally sat down. Yewande was already lying on the bed beside Simisola. Within minutes, both girls were asleep. Kunle stayed awake a little longer. Mummy, he said quietly. Yes, do you trust him? The question was direct, honest. Mojisola didn't answer immediately. She walked over and sat beside him. I don't know him, she said. Kunle nodded. But, she continued, he helped us when no one else did. Kunle looked down. That means something, she added. He thought about that, then nodded slowly. I'll watch, he said. Mojisola smiled faintly. I know you will. He leaned back, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself to sleep. Mojisola remained awake, sitting, watching, thinking. The room was quiet. The children were safe. The rain had stopped. But inside her, the storm had not fully passed. Because this place, this kindness, this sudden change, it all felt fragile. And deep down, Mojisola knew something. Peace like this never came without a test. Morning. In Adewale's house arrived without noise. No shouting neighbors, no scraping buckets, no dripping roof, counting down the seconds of another difficult day. Instead, soft light slipped gently through the curtains, settling quietly across the room. For a moment, Mojisola did not open her eyes. Her body had rested, but her mind had not. She lay still, listening. Nothing was wrong. That alone felt strange. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was clean, whole. No cracks, no stains, no water finding its way through weak places. For a second, she simply stared, as if expecting something to change. It didn't. She turned her head. Her children were still asleep. Yolanda lay on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek. Simisola, still weak, rested beside her, breathing steadily, her face calmer than it had been in days. Kunle slept on the other side of the bed. His body relaxed, no longer curled defensively like he had been used to. Mojisola sat up slowly. Her body felt lighter, not strong, but not as heavy. The difference was small, but real. She stood careful not to wake them and walked toward the window. Outside, the compound looked peaceful. Workers moved quietly. The world here followed a different rhythm, ordered, controlled, distant from the chaos she had known. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned. "Come in," she said. Bose entered, carrying a tray. "Good morning," she said politely. "Good morning," Mojisola replied. Bose placed the tray on the small table. "Breakfast." Mojisola looked at it. "Bread, eggs, tea, fruit. Enough for all of them." Her instinct was immediate. "This is too much," she said. Bose shook her head slightly. "It's standard." "Standard?" The word felt strange. Mojisola nodded slowly. "Thank you." Bose paused for a second. "You can call me if you need anything," she added. Then she left. Mojisola looked back at the tray, then at her children. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she gently woke them. "Wake up," she said, softly. "There is food." The reaction was immediate. Yuwand sat up quickly. Food Kunle blinked awake, then looked toward the table. Simisola stirred slowly, still weak but alert. They gathered around. This time, there was no hesitation. No dividing portions carefully. No pretending to be full. They ate. Quietly, gratefully. Mojisola watched them again. And again that feeling returned. Relief, mixed with something else. Fear, because nothing in her life had ever stayed this good for long. After they finished, there was another knock. "Adewale." "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," Mojisola replied. He stepped inside briefly, his eyes scanning the room. "You rested?" he asked. "A little," she said. He nodded. "Good." He turned slightly toward the children. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm better," Simisola said softly. Adewale gave a small nod. Kunle stood up straighter. "Thank you, sir," he said again. Adewale looked at him for a moment. "You don't have to thank me every time," he replied. Kunle didn't respond, because for him, it mattered. Adewale turned back to Mojisola. "Let's talk," he said. She nodded. "Children, stay here," she told them. They watched as she followed Adewale out of the room. They walked down the hallway in silence until they reached a quiet sitting area. Adewale gestured for her to sit. She did, but her posture remained straight, alert, ready. "I told you yesterday," Adewale began, "there may be work." "Yes, sir." He studied her. "You've done manual labor," he said. "Yes." "Can you read and write a little?" He nodded. "My company runs several warehouses." He continued. "We handle logistics, distribution, transport." Mojisola listened carefully. "I need people who understand hardship," he added. "People who won't ignore what others go through." She met his eyes. "I won't ignore it," she said. "I believe you." A pause. Then he continued. "There's a position not high, not easy, but stable. You'll work in one of the warehouses, monitoring, assisting, making sure workers are treated properly." Mojisola's breath caught slightly. "You mean a job?" "Yes. Not charity, not temporary. Help. A job." Her chest tightened. "I will do it," she said immediately. Adewale raised a hand slightly. "Think first," he said. "It will be hard. Long hours. Responsibility." "I have lived hard," she replied. "This is different." Adewale watched her, then nodded. "All right." Silence followed. Then Mojisola spoke again. "My children, they stay here," Adewale said. She froze slightly. "I will not leave them," she said quickly. "You don't have to," he replied calmly. "They stay here. They recover. They go to school." Mojisola stared at him. School. The word alone felt like something distant. "They can't go back to that life immediately?" Adewale added. "Not after this." Mojisola's mind struggled to catch up. This wasn't just help. This was change. Real change. "I don't know how to accept this," she admitted. Adewale leaned back slightly. "Start by not rejecting it," he said. She let out a small breath, then nodded. "I will try." A small silence settled. Then Adewale spoke again. "There's something else." Mojisola looked up. "The system in my company," he said slowly, "is not as clean as it should be." Her attention sharpened. "There are complaints," he continued. "Unfair treatment. Exploitation." Mojisola's mind flashed back. The market. The trader. The way people were treated like tools. "I saw it," she said quietly. "Outside?" Adewale nodded. "I want to know how deep it goes." Mojisola understood. "You want me to watch?" she said. "Yes, not as a spy, but as someone who understood. Someone who would notice what others ignored." "I will," she said. Their eyes met. For the first time, this was no longer just about help. This was about purpose. Adewale stood. "You start when you're ready," he said. Mojisola stood as well. "I am ready." He gave a small nod. As she turned to leave, he added, "Mojisola." She stopped. "Yes?" "You asked for a chance," he said. "This is it." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you," she said one last time. This time, It meant something different. Not desperation, not survival, but beginning. As she walked back toward the room where her children waited, Mojisola felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not just hope, but direction. And somewhere ahead, she could already sense it. The real battle had only just begun. The first sign of trouble did not arrive loudly. It came quietly, like most dangerous things do. 2 days after Mojisola began settling into Adewale's house, the rhythm of her life had started to change. Simisola was recovering well, her strength returning slowly with each meal and each hour of proper rest. Yuand had begun asking questions again about school, about books, about when she could wear a uniform like other children. Kunle remained watchful, but even he had softened slightly, allowing himself moments of curiosity in a world that no longer felt immediately hostile. And Mojisola, she was preparing for work, preparing for something new. But deep inside her, she knew change like this never came without resistance. That resistance arrived on a warm afternoon. Mojisola had just finished helping Bose arrange some items in the kitchen when she heard raised voices from the front of the house, not loud enough to cause panic, but sharp enough to signal tension. She paused. Bose glanced toward the hallway. "That's unusual," she murmured. "Should I check?" Mojisola asked. Bose hesitated. "No, it's probably nothing." But Mojisola had lived too long in unpredictable environments to ignore instincts. She stepped out quietly. The voices became clearer as she approached the entrance. "You can't just keep them here," a man was saying. The tone was controlled, but carried irritation beneath it. Mojisola stopped just before the doorway. She recognized that voice, not from memory, but from feeling. The kind of a voice that assumed authority, that expected control. Adewale responded calmly. "This is my house. That doesn't mean every decision you make is wise," the man replied. Mojisola stepped forward slowly and saw him, Femi Adebayo. Her breath caught. For a moment, everything inside her froze. He looked almost the same, cleaner, better dressed. But the same face, the same presence, the same man who had once promised her everything, then disappeared when she needed him most. Kunle, who had followed quietly behind her, saw him too. His body stiffened instantly. "That's him," Kunle whispered. Yuande moved closer to her brother. Fear returned to their faces, sharp, immediate. Mojisola's fingers trembled. Not from weakness, but from something deeper. Old pain. Unresolved. Dangerous. Femi turned slightly and saw her. For a second his expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation. Then something else. A smile. "Mojisola," he said as if her name belonged to him. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her body felt rooted to the floor. Adewale noticed immediately. His gaze went between them. "You know each other," he said. Femi stepped forward slightly. "Of course we do," he replied smoothly. "She's my wife?" The word landed heavily. Wrongly. Mojisola's voice returned sharp this time. No. Silence followed. Femi's smile tightened. Let's not pretend he said. We have children together. Children you abandoned, she replied. The air shifted. Tension deepened. Adewale's expression hardened slightly. You left? He asked. Femi shrugged. Things were complicated. Mojisola laughed softly. Not with humor, with disbelief. You disappeared, she said. You didn't look back. Femi waved a hand dismissively. I had reasons. Kunle stepped forward suddenly. You left us, he shouted. Mojisola reached for him quickly. Kunle, but it was too late. The truth was out. Femi looked at the boy. His son. There was no warmth in his eyes, only assessment. You've grown, he said. Kunle didn't respond. He simply stared. Mojisola stepped between them. You don't get to talk to him like that, she said firmly. Femi raised an eyebrow. Oh, and who decides that I do? Silence again. Then Femi turned back to Adewale. This is exactly what I came to discuss, he said calmly. Adewale's gaze remained steady. Explain. Femi adjusted his sleeve. I heard my family was taken in by a stranger, he said. A powerful one. They're not your responsibility anymore, Mojisola cut in. Femi ignored her. I came to take them back, he continued. The words hit like a shock. No, Mojisola said immediately. Femi looked at her. You don't decide that alone. I do, she replied. You left. You lost that right. Femi smiled slightly. That's not how the law works. A cold silence filled the room. Adewale stepped forward slightly. Are you threatening her? He asked. Femi shook his head. I'm stating facts. He turned back to Mojisola. You think staying here changes anything, he said. You think this man will solve your life. Mojisola didn't respond, because part of her feared that question. Femi stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't belong here, he said, and neither do those children. Kunle clenched his fists again. Yewande held his arm tightly. Mojisola's chest rose slowly. Then she spoke. I belong wherever my children are safe, she said. The words were calm, but strong. Femi's expression shifted again, less amused now, more calculating. He turned back to Adewale. You may not understand, he said, but this is a family matter. Adewale didn't hesitate. It became my concern the moment you walked into my house and spoke to them like that. Femi held his gaze. For a moment, two different worlds stood face to face. Power, control, history. Then Femi smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. This isn't over, he said. He turned and walked out, just like that. But this time, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a warning. Silence filled the space after he left. Heavy, uncomfortable. Kunle exhaled sharply. I hate him, he said. Mojisola pulled him close. I know, she whispered. Yewande leaned it into them both. Mummy, Will he come back? Mojisola didn't answer immediately, because she knew the truth. Yes, she said finally. Adewale watched them, his expression thoughtful now, serious. What he said, he began. Mojisola looked at him. He will try something, she said. Adewale nodded. I'll handle it. Mojisola shook her head slightly. No, she said. We'll handle it. He studied her, then nodded once. Respect, understanding. Because this was no longer just about protection. This was about standing together. And as the house returned to quiet, Mojisola felt it clearly. The peace she had stepped into had just been challenged, and the real fight had finally begun. The days that followed Finmi's visit did not return to calm. On the surface, everything in Adewale's house remained controlled, quiet routines, steady meals, careful care for Simisola, and small steps toward normal life for Kunle and Yuand. But beneath that calm, something had shifted. Mojisola could feel it. A tension, an unseen pressure building slowly like a storm that had not yet broken. She had started work at the warehouse 2 days after Simisola's discharge. It was not a grand position, but it was real, structured, necessary. For the first time in years, she wore a name badge with her own name printed clearly on it. Mojisola Adeyemi. It felt strange, but it also felt grounding. The warehouse itself was large, filled with stacked goods moving workers, and the constant rhythm of logistics, loading, checking, dispatching. At first glance, everything appeared organized, but Mojisola did not look at things the way others did. She looked deeper. She noticed the workers who avoided eye contact, the ones who worked longer than others, the quiet signals between supervisors, the tension in the air that didn't match the efficiency on paper. On her third day, she saw it clearly. A young man struggled to lift a crate that was too heavy for one person. Leave it, a supervisor snapped. Move faster. I need help, the worker said quietly. You need your pay, the supervisor replied coldly. So move. Mojisola felt something tighten in her chest. She stepped forward. I can help, she said. The supervisor turned sharply. Who asked you? He said. Mojisola met his gaze. No one, she replied. But he needs help, the supervisor scoffed. This is not your concern. Mojisola didn't move. It is, she said calmly. The worker looked at her surprised, then relieved. The supervisor stepped closer. You're new? He said. Don't start creating problems. Mojisola held his gaze. I'm not creating problems, she said. I'm seeing one. A small crowd had begun to notice. Silence settled briefly. Then the supervisor stepped back. Do what you want, he muttered. Mojisola helped the worker lift the crate. It wasn't easy, but it was possible with help. As they set it down, the worker looked at her. Thank you, he said quietly. Mojisola nodded. What's your name? She asked. Emeka. She nodded again. Don't carry what you can't, she said. He gave a faint smile. I don't always have a choice. Those words stayed with her, because they were familiar. Too familiar. That evening, Mojisola returned to the house, her mind heavy with everything she had seen. Adwal was in the sitting room when she arrived. "How was work?" he asked. She didn't sit immediately. "It's happening," she said. Adewale looked at her. "Tell me," she explained, "the long hours, the pressure, the silent fear amongst workers, the way supervisors pushed beyond limits, the way people accepted it because they needed the job." Adewale listened, without interrupting. His expression grew more serious with every word. "I suspected," he said quietly, "but suspicion isn't proof." Mojisola nodded. "I will get proof." He looked at her carefully. "You don't have to put yourself at risk." "I'm not afraid of risk," she replied. "I've lived with worse." A pause. Then Adewale spoke again. "Be careful," he said. "I will." Across the room, Kunle was watching, listening, learning. That night, Mojisola couldn't sleep easily, not because of fear, but because something inside her had awakened. Not just survival, but purpose. She wasn't just working anymore. She was seeing, understanding, and preparing. The next day, the tension grew. When Mojisola arrived at the warehouse, she noticed something different. People were quieter, more cautious, and the supervisors, they were watching her. Closely, too closely. As she moved through her tasks, she felt their eyes on her, measuring, waiting. Later that afternoon, she overheard something. Two supervisors speaking near the loading area. "She's asking questions," one said. "Too many," the other replied. "Where did she come from?" "From the boss himself." A pause. "That makes it worse." Mojisola stepped back quietly. Her heart was steady, but her mind was alert. They knew, not everything, but enough. That evening, as she prepared to leave, one of the supervisors approached her. "Stay back," he said. Her body stiffened slightly. "For what?" she asked. "Extra work," he replied. There was no notice. He smiled faintly. "There is now." Mojisola held his gaze. "I have children to return to, and you have a job to keep," he said. The message was clear. She was being tested, pressured, measured. Mojisola nodded slowly. "I will finish quickly," she said. The supervisor stepped aside. "Good." As she worked, she noticed something else. Records, shipment, logs, numbers that didn't match, missing entries, unaccounted goods. Her mind sharpened. This wasn't just labor abuse. This was something deeper, something organized, something dangerous. When she finally left, it was late. Too late. By the time she returned home, the house was quiet. Kunle was waiting. "You're late," he said. "I know." He studied her. "They're watching you," he said. Mojisola paused. "You noticed?" He nodded. "I saw it when I visited earlier." She sat beside him. "They're hiding something," she said. Kunle nodded. "And you're going to find it." She looked at him. "Yes." He leaned back slightly. "Then be careful." Mojisola smiled faintly. "I always am." But deep down she knew something had changed. This was no longer just about work, no longer just about survival. She had stepped into something bigger, something that connected to power, to control, to people who did not want to be exposed. And somewhere, outside the house, outside the warehouse, Femi was still there, watching, waiting, planning. And as Mojisola lay down that night, she understood something clearly. The life she had stepped into was not just a chance. It was a battlefield, and she was already standing in the middle of it. The morning began like any other, quiet, ordered, deceptively calm. But by midday, everything broke. Mojisola had just finished reviewing a stack of shipment logs when she noticed something, again numbers, that didn't align. Signatures that looked rushed, and missing entries that could not be explained by simple mistakes. The more she observed, the clearer it became. This was not carelessness. This was deliberate. Her heart beat steadily. Not fast, not panicked, just focused. She reached for a small notebook she had started keeping hidden in her bag. Inside, she had been writing quietly dates, names, times, irregular movements, and conversations she had overheard. It wasn't much yet, but it was enough to form a pattern. And patterns told stories, dangerous ones. Mojisola. The voice came from behind her. She turned. The same supervisor from the previous day stood there, his expression unreadable. "Yes," she replied calmly. "You're needed at the back section," he said. She nodded. "I'm coming." As she walked, she felt it again. Eyes. Watching. Not casual. Not curious. Focused. When she reached the back section, the space felt different. Less crowded. More isolated. Fewer workers. Fewer witnesses. The supervisor gestured toward a stack of crates. "Check those," he said. For what she asked? For accuracy. She stepped forward, but something inside her tightened. This didn't feel like normal work. Still, she moved carefully, opening one crate, then another. Everything appeared normal at first glance. But then she noticed it. One crate was labeled as containing packaged food supplies. But inside, there were electronics, new, boxed, unrecorded. Her breath slowed. This was it. Proof. Before she could react, footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. Two men stood there now. Not workers. Not supervisors. "Something else. Find something interesting," one of them asked. Mojisola straightened. "I'm doing my job," she said. The man smiled slightly. "No," he replied. "You're doing too much." Silence filled the space. Heavy, controlled. The second man stepped closer. "You ask questions," he said. "You look where others don't." Mojisola didn't move. "That's not safe," he added. Her voice remained steady. "What you're doing here isn't safe either." The first man laughed, softly. "You're brave." "No," she said. "I'm tired." That answer caught them off guard, just for a second. Then the first man's expression hardened. "You should go home early today," he said. It sounded like advice, but it wasn't. It was a warning. Mojisola nodded slowly. "I understand." She turned, walked, didn't run, didn't rush. But her mind was already moving faster than her steps. She had seen enough. Too much. And now, they knew she had seen. By the time she reached the front of the warehouse, Her heart was beating harder. Not from fear, from urgency. She needed to tell Adewale. Now. She reached for her phone, then froze. It was gone. Her bag felt lighter. Her breath caught. They had taken it. Everything inside. Her notes. Her records. Gone. For the first time that day, fear broke through. She turned sharply, scanning, watching. But the warehouse continued as if nothing had happened. As if she had imagined everything. As if she had no proof. Mojisola. The voice came from behind her again. This time different. She turned. Emeka! Breathing hard. They're looking for you, he said quickly. I know, she replied. You need to leave, he added. I'm trying. He stepped closer. They took your bag, he said. I know. They're going to say you stole something. The words hit hard, cold, precise. A trap. Mojisola closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, clear, focused. Thank you, she said. Mecca nodded. Go, he urged. She didn't wait. She moved. Fast now. Out of the warehouse, into the open air. Her steps quickened. Her mind racing. They were already ahead. Already building the story. Already preparing to destroy her. As she reached the gate, 2 security men stepped forward. Stop, one said. Mojisola froze. What is it, she asked. We need to search you. For what? Stolen goods. There it was. The accusation. Already formed. Already ready. Mojisola lifted her hands slowly. I didn't take anything. Then you won't mind, the guard replied. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. Search, she said. They checked her. Nothing. Of course, nothing. Because the evidence was never meant to be found on her. The guard stepped back. You can go. But the damage was already done. The word would spread. Stolen. Untrustworthy. Guilty. Mojisola walked out. Step by step. Her body steady. But inside, everything burned. By the time she reached the road, her breath came faster. Her hands trembled. Not from weakness, from anger, from realization. This wasn't just about the warehouse anymore. This was bigger, planned, connected. She reached the house. The gates opened. She stepped inside. And for the first time since she arrived there, she didn't feel safe. Inside, Kunle was waiting. He stood up immediately. Mummy. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes searched the room. Where was Adewale? He's not back yet, Kunle said. Mojisola nodded slowly. They took my bag, she said. Kunle's face tightened. They know. Yes. Silence. Then Kunle spoke again. What do we do? Mojisola looked at him, her son, her strength, her reason. We fight, she said. Simple. Clear. Real. Because there was no other option left. And somewhere far beyond the house, Femi was still out there. And now everything was starting to connect. The lies, the threats, the system, the trap. Mojisola stood still for a moment, then took a slow breath. Because she understood something now. This wasn't just a test. This was war. And she had just been pushed into the center of it. By the time Adewale returned that evening, the house no longer felt like a place of quiet refuge. It felt like a place waiting for truth. Mojisola stood in the sitting room, her posture steady, her face composed, but inside everything was sharpened to a single point: focus. Kunle stood nearby watching the door. Yuand sat quietly, with Simisola, who was still recovering, unaware of how quickly the fragile peace around them had begun to crack. The moment Adewale stepped inside, he knew something had changed. He didn't ask immediately. He simply looked at Mojisola. "What happened?" he said. She didn't waste time. "They're moving goods illegally," she said. "Not just labor abuse. It's bigger." Adewale's expression hardened instantly. "Show me." "They took my bag," she replied. "My notes. Everything I recorded." A pause. "Then they framed me for theft," she added. Silence fell. Heavy. Controlled. Adewale stepped forward slowly. "Tell me everything," he said. Mojisola did. From the mismatched logs, to the hidden crates, to the men in the back section, to the warning, to the search at the gate, to the accusation already spreading. She spoke clearly, without panic, without exaggeration, just truth. When she finished, Adewale didn't respond immediately. He turned, walked a few steps away, then back. His jaw was tight now, controlled anger. "They think they can bury this," he said quietly. Mojisola met his eyes. They almost did. A small silence passed between them. Then Adewale reached for his phone. "Get everyone," he said, into it. Board members. Senior staff. Now. Mojisola blinked slightly. "Now?" she asked. "Yes." His voice left no room for doubt. "This ends tonight." Within an hour, the house transformed. Cars arrived. Men and women stepped in, well-dressed, confident, unaware of the storm they were walking into. The boardroom inside the house filled quickly. Whispers, confusion, expectation. Mojisola stood at the back at first, quiet while watching. This was not her world, but it was now her fight. Adewale entered last. The room fell silent immediately. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table. "Something is happening in my company," he said. No greeting, no introduction, straight to truth. Something illegal, organized, hidden. The room shifted. People exchanged glances, some confused, some already tense. "I want answers," Adewale continued. Silence. Then Ronke Ajibola stood, calm, controlled. "I'm not aware of any such activity," she said. Mojisola recognized her immediately. The HR director. Sharp, observant, dangerous. Adewale looked at her. "You should be." Ronke held his gaze. "If something like that exists, we would need proof." The word hung in the air. Proof. Mojisola felt it. The missing piece, the thing they had taken from her. Adewale turned slightly. Mojisola. All eyes followed. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. The room shifted again. Curiosity now. Judgment. Whispers behind still faces. She stood where everyone could see her. Her clothes simple. Her posture steady. "I saw it," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. Hidden goods. Changed records. Workers pushed beyond limits. Threats. Ronke tilted her head slightly. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious truth," Mojisola replied. A murmur moved through the room. One of the board members spoke. "Where is your evidence?" There it was again. "The same wall, the same weapon." Mojisola took a breath. "They took it," she said. "My notes, my records." A slight shift in the room, doubt creeping in. Ronke's lips curved slightly. "Convenient," she said. Mojisola didn't react, because she expected this. Instead, she turned slightly. Emeka. The name cut through the room. A man stepped forward slowly. The same worker from the warehouse. He looked nervous, but he didn't stop. "They forced us," he said. His voice was low, but clear. "They make us carry more than we should. If we refuse, they cut pay or remove us." Another worker stepped forward, then another, one by one. Voices rising, stories aligning, truth building. The room changed. No longer controlled, no longer safe for lies. Ronke's expression shifted slightly. Only slightly. Adewale watched everything. Then he spoke again. "Security footage," he said. A man at the side nodded quickly. A screen lit up. Clips appeared. Warehouse footage. Crates being moved. Different labels. Different contents. Faces visible. Names known. The truth clear now. Undeniable. The room fell into silence. Heavy. Final. Ronke didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. Adewale turned toward her. "You knew," he said. She didn't answer. "Or you chose not to know." Still silence. Adewale's voice hardened. "You're dismissed." The words were simple, but absolute. Gasps filled the room. Ronke stood still, then slowly gathered her things. No apology, no denial, just exit. Others followed. Names called, positions stripped, the system broken, exposed, destroyed. Mojisola stood still, watching it all. This wasn't just justice. This was power, used correctly. For once. Adewale turned back to the room. "This company will not run on fear," he said. "Not anymore." Silence. Then he looked at Mojisola. "You stood," he said. She didn't respond, because she didn't know what to say. Then Kunle stepped forward. From the doorway. "I told you," he said. Quietly. "She always stands." The room shifted again. This time, not with tension, but with something else. Respect. Real. Undeniable. Mojisola looked at her son, then back at the room, then at Adewale. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like someone being helped. She felt like someone who had fought and won. But even in that moment, she knew this wasn't the final battle, because somewhere outside Femi was still watching, still waiting, and now he had lost control, which made him more dangerous than ever. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the fragile silence of uncertainty. It was the kind of quiet that follows truth, the kind that settles after a storm has passed but leaves the ground changed forever. Mojisola stood by the window, watching the evening light stretch across the compound. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. And her children's voices drifted softly from the living room. Yewanded was laughing, really laughing over something small. Simasola's voice, still weak but lively, followed. Kunla's deeper tone grounded them both. Safe. They were safe. For the first time in a long time, that word didn't feel temporary. Footsteps approached. Adewale. He stopped a few steps behind her. "It's done," he said. Mojisola didn't turn immediately. "Yes," she replied. "They've been removed," he continued. "Investigations have started. The authorities will take it from here." Mojisola nodded slowly. Justice. Not perfect, but real. She turned to face him. "Thank you," she said. This time, the words carried weight beyond gratitude. They carried acknowledgement. Adewale shook his head slightly. "You did the hard part." She held his gaze. "I didn't do it alone." A pause. Then Adewale spoke again. "There's something else we need to discuss." Mojisola's attention sharpened. "What is it, Femi?" The name alone changed the air. Mojisola's body tensed slightly. "He won't stop," she said. "No," Adewale agreed. "But he won't come at you the same way again." She waited. "I've spoken to a lawyer," he continued. "We're securing full legal protection. He has no stable claim. His absence, his actions, they work against him." Mojisola exhaled slowly. Relief came, but carefully, because she had learned not to trust relief too quickly. "He threatened custody," she said. Adewale nodded. "He can try," he replied, "but he won't succeed." Mojisola looked down briefly, then back up. "I'm not afraid of him anymore," she said. Adewale studied her. He believed her, because fear had been replaced by something stronger. Clarity. A quiet moment passed. Then Adewale spoke again. "There's a new role opening," he said. Mojisola blinked slightly. "What kind of role?" "Not in the warehouse," he said. "Above it." Her brow furrowed. "I don't understand." Adewale stepped closer. "I'm starting a new division," he explained, "focused on worker welfare, oversight, protection, real accountability." Mojisola's heart shifted. "You want me to—" "Lead it," he said. Silence. Deep. Unexpected. Mojisola stared at him. "I'm not educated enough for that," she said immediately. Adewale shook his head. You understand what matters, he replied, more than anyone else I've seen. She didn't answer, because doubt rose quickly, fast, sharp. I've carried loads, she said. I've cleaned floors. I've survived. That's not leadership. Adewale's voice remained steady. That's exactly why it is. She looked at him, conflicted, unsure. People in those warehouses need someone who sees them, he continued, not someone who studies them from a distance. Mojisola's chest tightened, because part of her understood. Pull no the the part, shaped by years of being overlooked. Resisted. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. Adewale nodded. You'll learn, he said, and I'll make sure you're trained properly. Silence again. But different now. Possibility, not pressure. Mojisola took a slow breath, then another. She looked toward the living room, at her children, at everything she had fought through, at everything she had survived. Then back at Adewale. I'll try, she said. That was enough. Adewale nodded once. Good. Another quiet moment passed. Then there's one more thing, he added. Mojisola waited. You don't have to leave this house. The words landed softly, but carried weight. Mojisola's expression shifted. I can't stay here forever, she said. You're not being asked to, he replied. You're being given time. Time. To rebuild. To stabilize. To become something new. I don't want it to depend on you, she said again. Adewale met her gaze. You're not depending, he replied. You're transitioning. The distinction mattered. More than she expected. Mojisola nodded slowly. I understand. Later that evening, they sat together at the dining table. Not as strangers, not as rescuer and rescued, but as something else, something quieter, something more balanced. The children ate freely, their laughter filling the space naturally now. Kunla spoke about school. Yuande talked about books she wanted to read. Simisola smiled more than she coughed. Mojisola watched them, and something inside her settled. Not completely, but enough. After dinner, Kunle walked over to her. Mummy, he said. Yes. Are we staying? Mojisola looked at him, then at Adewale, then back at her son. For now, she said. Kunle nodded. He didn't ask more, because for the first time, for now, didn't sound uncertain. It sounded safe. That night, as the house grew quiet again, Mojisola stood once more by the window. But this time, she wasn't looking at what she had lost. She was looking at what she had built. Not alone, but not helpless either. A life that had once been defined by survival was now defined by direction. And somewhere deep inside her, she understood something clearly. She had not been saved. She had been seen, and that had changed everything. Sometimes life doesn't change because someone saves you. It changes because someone sees you when the world chooses not to. Mojisola's story is not just about poverty or struggle. It's about dignity, about the strength it takes to keep going when everything tells you to stop, about the courage to stand even when your voice shakes and your path is uncertain. Many people wait for miracles, but often the real miracle is the moment someone refuses to look away. And sometimes that person is you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever been in a place where you felt unseen? Or have you ever had the chance to help someone and chose to step forward? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else who is still fighting their own battle. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of hope, resilience, and justice. Like and share this video so more people can be reminded kindness still matters, and sometimes it changes everything.